Hello, everybody. Today, at our third edition of IMAGO Art and Tech, we are honored to welcome two distinguished guests um, in this talk. We appreciate their presence and also we want to extend our gratitude to LEITZ for their many years of support for IMAGO. This year, for various reasons, we were unable to hold our talks. However, thanks to the work of the IMAGO Masterclass Committee, thanks to Marcela Borso, to Lars Peterson, and on the other hand, Lights, Seth Emmons, and Nela Fernandez, we can resume our meetings with the happy coincidence that one of our guests is seeing the premiere of his work, Frankenstein, this week in several countries around the world. With our guest today, we cover a broad spectrum of image creation, from the imaginative worlds of science fiction to the musicals or stark realism that documentary filmmaking can offer. Art and Tech is also a space to discuss about the tools we use. Creating beautiful images requires not only artistic intention, but also the use of appropriate equipment. It doesn't have to be the most expensive or sophisticated, but simply which serves the artistic purpose. Sometimes the sensitivity and insight of the person behind the camera are enough. Thank you all for being here. And now I'll give the floor to Lars, our moderator, to introduce our guests.
Yes, hello, good evening, and welcome to the third edition of IMAGO Art and Tech. And my name is Lars Peterson. I will be the moderator here for this discussion. And we have three distinguished guests here on the panel. And the first is Seth Emmons, who works for LEITZ, the renowned makers of fine lenses for stills photography and for cinematography as well. And uh, Seth has spent the last 2 decades as a liaison, you could say, between the cinema industry and the manufacturers. And then we have two more guests, two distinguished cinematographers. We have Tony Miller, BSc. Um, where do we have Tony? There's Tony. Hi there, Tony. Uh, a brief description of Tony must include that he grew up in both Sweden and Holland. He can tell us a little bit more about that later, perhaps. And he started out in documentary as a documentary cameraman, and as such, worked closely with Mike Ely, a former EC president, and also Barry Ackroyd, who is a very famous British cinematographer as well. Um, he has a pilot's license, which I think we'll get into a little bit when we start talking about the various topics here. And to mention some of his more well-known titles, we have Carnival Row and also the Fleabag TV series, and he's working mainly in the long series format or feature films or series. And then we have Dan Louston. We can have Dan. There is Dan. Hello, Dan. And Dan is a distinguished Danish cinematographer, and he has two Oscar nominations. And one of the films that he worked for Guillermo del Toro on won a Best Picture Oscar. So you could say it's three Oscar nominations then. And at age 14, he started out as a stills photographer, And 3 years later, he enrolled in a fashion school to be a fashion stills photographer, but grew disenchanted with that and applied to the Danish Film School, where he was trained as a cinematographer. And he has by now 60 international feature films under his belt, and is well known for his collaboration with Guillermo del Toro, uh, notably Frankenstein, which is now had a brief cinema run and is now on Netflix, and also the John Wick series, where he has photographed the second, third, and fourth installments. So that's our panel, and we were going to start out with Seth giving us an overview of the various families of LEITZ Cine lenses.
Thank you, Lars. It's great to be here with all of you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tony, for doing this, and thank you to IMAGO for putting this talk together. I know that we're really all here to hear from Dan and Tony, so I'm going to keep this part really brief. But there are a few things that come up regularly in the world of LEITZ that I wanted to share because, well, it's a good opportunity to talk with a lot of people. One of the biggest things is our name. So you see that there's a familiar red dot there, but it says LEITZ instead of Leica. We're often thought of as a same as Leica, but we're actually a sister company. So in this image in the back top right, you see the Leica factory in Wetzlar, Germany. In the front left is our factory where we build our cinema lenses, and we build all but one of our lines of lenses in that factory in Germany. The company LEITZ Cine was founded by the owner of Leica, Dr. Kaufman, in 2008. And for the last 15 years, we have been bringing lenses to the cinema world. So this is just a kind of a quick timeline, and it adds up to 8 series of prime lenses and a pair of zooms in 15 years, which is a kind of a prolific output. But when you consider that all of our glass is designed not to offer the same look, but to offer different looks, different formats, each of these lenses has their place and has their opportunity. Everybody's vision is different. Some cinematographers gravitate toward particular lenses and use those across multiple projects. Some people like to choose lenses per project. For that reason, we wanted to offer a large selection across a lot of formats, but that's a lot to absorb and understand what they all are. So I'm just going to spend a little time breaking these down. When we conceptualize product development, we do it over 3 different priorities. So we divide our lenses up into performance, character, and legacy, and I'll just briefly go through what those are. Performance is where that is the main object, is to have a high performing, high resolution, clean image from edge to edge. A lot of people are familiar with our first lenses we ever did, the Summilux lenses. They fit squarely in this category. The category on the right side, the legacy, all of these lenses come from our sister company, Leica Camera. We use their optics from the photography lenses with cinema housings in various ways to bring those looks directly into the cinema world. And then the third category is character. And this is where we can get a little bit creative. We're not tied to a performance standard. We're not tied to an existing optical design. We can be more creative and start designing things that have a unique feel to them and stand apart. So again, just to associate the lenses with those categories, and then I'm throwing the formats in here too, just to keep it nice and tidy. The LEITZ primes, LEITZ zooms, and Summiluxes are performance lenses. They're really clean. You'll hear those come up in this conversation because one of our DPs is a fan of these. In the character ones, you have the LC at full frame, Summicron, and then Hectors, which are our new ones. And I'll go over those a little bit here toward the end of the presentation. And then in legacy, again, with the Leica photography glass, the Thalia 65 lenses are using Leica's S medium format glass. So they cover a very large image circle up to 65 millimeter. And the M0.8 and Hugo's, both of those use Leica's M photography rangefinder glass and put those into a couple of different housings. So again, just to kind of see what these look like, you've got Super 35 on the left, full frame, middle and to the right. Then with character, Summicrons are Super 35, LC full frame, Hector full frame but mirrorless mounts. And then here we have our legacy, the Thalias, of course, with the medium format glass, and then the M0.8s, which are Leica's rangefinder glass with just a little bit of addition of gears to keep them really, really small. And then a version called Hugo that takes that glass and puts it into a proper cinema housing. So now that there's a little bit of clarity around where they go, what do they look like is the next question. And we've created a tool on our website to let you all check that out. I'm not going to bother to go through and describe it all with words when you can see it in pictures. So if you go to our website, leitz-cine.com, right at the top of the page, there's a link that says compare lenses. And we shot this scene last year where we did camera movement, we did close-up, we did all these different things with all of our lenses at various focal lengths and various t-stops. So you can actually look at and compare, and you can do up to 4 different lenses or focal lengths or apertures all together and look at them play simultaneously. So some of the things you'll see in there are flare comparisons. If you also want to see flares, our friends at cineflares.com have recently added all of our lenses to their inventory. If you're not familiar, cineflares.com is a great online resource to compare simply the flare characteristics of the lenses. It's that, and it does it really, really well. This also shows some coverage comparison because we shot this on the Venice 8K full 4:3 sensor. So you can see where lenses cover or don't cover. And we also did close focus, which was kind of fun to see. Some of the lenses have a really, really close focus. Some of them are more standard. So the Hector lenses, again, I'm going to go through this really briefly. On our website, we have a lot of resources about these new lenses that we just announced in September. So again, I won't belabor it too much. Just to say that these are mirrorless lenses that work with almost every camera system out there has a mirrorless mount as a base. So those are options for that. But these were inspired by Leica's older lenses from the 30s and 50s. So a lot of vintage characteristic, but with a modern build quality, a modern functionality, things you would expect in a modern lens. And we make these all in Germany like we do our other lenses. These, I would say, they fall into our character category and probably take that to the furthest extent that we have with any of our lenses, because they really were trying to emulate the best of vintage lens characteristics, softening focus, field curvature, and fall off to bring the viewer to the center, really rich, warm flares. And again, all these resources on our website, including these still images, are from a lookbook that we created to highlight the different characteristics, like the lack of chromatic aberration and the focus curvature, swirly bokeh that is inspired by Petzval. It's not a true Petzval effect, but it has a little bit of that character through spherical aberration and the cat's eye effect on the bokeh. So I encourage you to go check those out. They're also very easy to service. Everything that needs to be done to them except replacing, the housing can be done at any capable rental house. So yeah, like I said, short, sweet. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions. That's my information on the screen. I'm also easily findable online, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Now let's get to the fun stuff.
Oh, wait. Thank you, Seth. How does the new Hectors fit into the bigger family?
So the Hugo lenses are based on modern M photography lenses, and rangefinder lenses by design, especially Leica's, have some of the characteristics that you see in vintage lenses. by going back into the history and being inspired by that older style, making them in the older style as well with all spherical elements, they take that Hugo look that people have come to like and vintagize it even further, but without chromatic aberration, without veiling glare to the extent most older lenses have.
Okay, all right, thank you. So now for Dan and Tony, could we ask you to just very briefly describe your earliest beginnings, just in a few words? And I'm particularly interested in if there were any mentors there that got you on the right path in terms of cinematography. And Tony, would you like to start?
Sure. As you said, I grew up in Holland and Sweden, and I was an actor in the National Youth Theatre. I did a play at the Old Vic. Dan Day-Lewis played my father. And I went to do drama at Bristol University, where I rapidly realized I think I was a liability in front of the camera is the best thing. And I think what had happened earlier was that my father I'd played around with Leica M3 and took pictures and a Bolex Super 16. And I was very influenced by Chris Menges and particularly his documentary work. His work was always very political, and Kathy Come Home and Kess and The Tribe That Hides From Man just knocked me out. And so I think my early beginnings were very influenced by Chris. You used to have a union card, and Chris and various others signed mine when I was 23. And I got off early. I went to Burma. I crossed the border illegally and filmed a student massacre which had killed 4,000 students, and they'd fled to the jungles of Burma. And that got me a documentary with Channel 4. I then went to make 2 more human rights documentaries there, decided I would never go to war again, and I never have. But it set me on the path to do documentaries, and I got in the door with document films. Barry, it was like a sort of mini Magnum in London. They gave you 2 art-ons, and your association with them got you fantastic documentaries. And Barry was leaving as I went, but it was all about shooting naturalistic, auteur-led documentaries. And me and Mike Healy joined, and we had a real golden era of shooting film documentaries for the next 10 years or so.
Okay, thank you. Dan, would you like to briefly describe your early beginnings and if someone was an important mentor for you in those years?
I'm educating as a fashion photographer, and I was done with that when I was 19, 20 or something, and I just hated it, and I didn't know what to do. And then I saw, actually my big sister saw advertising for the Danish Film School about how to, if you want to apply to the school. And she said to me, "What about that?" And I said, "I don't care about movies, not my call. I want to be a documentary photographer." And Big Sister says, everybody knows Big Sister said, "Don't be like that, just try it." So I applied to the film school, and I have no clue about filmmaking, like not a single, I've never seen a film camera, I've never been near a film set. So I came to the film school, I applied, and it gets to interview, and I came in right away without a test or anything. That was, of course, super, super scary, because everybody else in the film school was those guys that dreamed about being cinematographers since they could walk. So I came into the film school when I was like 21, I think. And I have no clue about it. I've never seen a film camera, so I didn't know nothing about it. But you have to follow your heart, and suddenly everything's changed for me, because I went to the school together with all my other students, fellows, and it was like so inspiration. And of course, when you're coming to the school, you are allowed to do all the mistakes in the world, because that's where you're learning from. So I have 3.5 years in the Danish Film School, where I learned my basic on movie making. And one of our teachers there was Andreas Fischer Hansen. He's unfortunately not here anymore. But he was so good to take other cinematographers in, and he brought Gunnar Nyqvist, I think it was his name, Bergman's first cinematographer. And he was like amazing to learn us about movie making. So he was actually my only and first mentor. That was fantastic. Film school is the best. I can recommend that for everybody. It's like film school is, from my point of view, fantastic.
Okay. Thank you, Dan and Tony. There.
Yeah.
I'm also interested if there was some important sort of aha moment for you in terms of cinematography early on, something you discovered or some insight you got that really was important for you. So who wants
I
to start?
think again,
Dan?
Gunnar Nyqvist, he talked about, where to, because I really like to lighting this stuff. He was very precise about how to light. Where should the camera be? Where should the key light coming from? This whole classic way to light a set. And I've done a lot of documentaries as well, but I'm not a big fan of, oh, by the way, I like to control everything. And he learned me that. He learned our students to be, this is how to tell the story with a camera, how to tell the story with a light. I think that is my aha, because he showed us a lot of his stuff, that was like so fantastic. But some years ago, so I don't remember it clearly, but just remember the way he was talking about light and key light. It was very interesting.
Okay, thank you. Tony, do you have, I think you mentioned it, you and I were in touch and you said you had numerous aha moments. Could you pick one that was sort of seminal?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what I said when you asked me was that I still have aha moments because I find cinematography so difficult and I learn every single time I do a film. So I think the early ones were, I think, influenced by shooting documentary, by trying to underscore emotion but working with natural light and having to, Nestor Almendros was very influential too because he made things look beautiful. And I, unlike Barry Ackroyd, for instance, who was very purist, I wanted to light and I wanted to use the tools that documentary had taught me, how to cover things economically, how to tell a story, how to think about how could I underscore the emotion that was going on. And I think that led me, particularly with fiction, to want to light with a single source. At least that was my point of departure, or use the documentary tools of start with naturalism, but don't be beholden to naturalism. Light emotionally. And I think one big aha moment was being dragged around tons of fucking galleries by my parents and looking and seeing that Rembrandt cheats. It's not just one light, but he wraps it around. And yet these pictures tell a story, and they tell a story in a way that is more than just that portrait. So I think when I worked out it wasn't just a single source, that you could cheat, and that as a cinematographer you needed to cheat to really underscore emotion. That was a wake-up moment, I guess.
Okay, thank you. So moving on in your respective careers here, what was your first experience using LEITZ lenses on a shoot? I imagine that could have been early on with some of the vintage or legacy lenses. So we would like to talk a little about that.
I shot my first film with Leica lenses for like 3 years ago, I think. So for me, it's 100% new, but I'm not regretted. But in the beginning, I shot my first feature film in '79. And as we talk about, the budget and the light and the crew was so small. The first feature I did was a Danish feature, and the camera department was 2 people. I was the DP operating, and there was a focus puller. That was the crew. So,
Wow.
those days you could not choose about. I could not choose about what equipment I want to have, because the rental house and the studio have a box of something, and that was what you want to use. I think there was like some size lenses or whatever it was, but there was not. It was a time where I started, where you didn't have any options to discuss anything because, yes, as I said, the Danish studios I work for we have a camera, a BL4, whatever it was, and then we have a set of lenses, and that set was pretty small. So that was what, and as you said, Tony, it's a little bit like documentary because you have to do what you have to work around with the stuff you have. The crew was so small, but again, single source lighting. I try to do it as realistic as possible because I think that was the style those days. When I started there, you could not be crazy about bringing a key light in from, when people are sitting against the window, they have to have the light from the window. Now you can do whatever. And that was, when I was starting, there was so many rules about, if you do a two close-ups, they have to be the same size, the same height, all that. Otherwise, the editor said, you cannot cut it together. There were so many rules. And I think that's the freedom we have right now. You can do whatever you like, but there was those days, there was a box and you have to use that box. And there was a small lens box with very few lenses. But again, it looks pretty cool.
Okay. Tony, I think you had experienced fairly early on with the legacy LEITZ lenses.
Yeah, I had. I mean, I guess the seminal moment really was the transition from film to digital, and I managed to carry on shooting film till quite late. And when I went to digital, there was this sense of how do you create looks, and I think my first reaction was with Chris Edwards, who runs Optical Support here in London. We sort of set up sort of the vintage lens company, and we had loads of vintage lenses and we used them, and I used them on films, movies and TV series I was doing, and I just rapidly got very fed up with them because they would break down. I remember one of my focus pullers, she was panicking because the 35mm would distort in the middle of the frame, and it took me to actually deciding that I just wanted a lens that did a job as a tool that was sharp left to right, and where I could, with filtration and other tools, control it. And I started with Summilux, and I loved the fact that they were sharp left to right, and they fulfilled me in many ways. They were beautifully, beautifully made, and they were sharp left to right. They were slightly cold, I found. And I think then later on when the LEITZ Primes came out, the full frame ones, and I love shooting full frame for lots of reasons I won't go into now, but I just thought this is it. This is the lens. It's sharp left to right. They're slightly softer than the Summilux, and they're warmer, and they have this contrast. And I think, the lenses I'm drawn to has always been master primes, master anamorphics, the new ARRI alphas that I shot on a few weeks ago, and it's because they have this beautiful contrast to them. And I felt that, with the LEITZ primes, and I don't want to be a salesman, which I'm not, but I just like the fact I could forget about them and I can cook. And I guess that's where I've been. And in a way, it took me years to understand how to predict exactly what I would get on a film negative. And I sort of want to do that with digital. And it's been a bit of a learning curve in the last 10 years to do that. I use the same Rec 709 LUT. I don't use LUTs because I want repeatability. And I want, with the director and the gaffer and those who are looking carefully at the image publicly now, unlike film, to be able to say, this is what it hopefully will look like. And I want to try and get as close to that as I can on set. So lenses are a big part of that. And then I can forget about them.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, both Dan and Tony there. So the LEITZ Prime family set, about when did they start to emerge?
They came out in, I think it was 2018, 2019 was when they first started being delivered.
Right, and they started shipping a couple of focal lengths at a time, right?
I think we started with 8 being fully ready at the same time, and then we added a couple extra ones.
Okay. So, Tony, you mentioned here the transition to film, from film to digital, which is something that happened sort of from 2006 on to then the floodgates really opened around 2010, something like that, I would say. And Tony, you mentioned you sort of stuck to film for a while. Dan, were you an early adopter? Did you find the switch to digital easy for you, or
No,
what
I
did you
hated
like?
it. I'm so much a film guy. I was a film guy. I'm not that anymore. I've shot 40 features on film in all over the world, and I love it, and I think it was really, really good. And going back to lenses a little bit, when I start to shoot Panavision in the United States, I shoot with Panavision Primo lenses because I've always been a Primo lens, guys. I'm not, as Tony's talking about, I'm not into vintage. I just want to have a lens that can do what I'm asking for. If I want to have a flare, I want to make it. I don't want to have a lens flare, by the way. But no, I was a backseat driver. I really didn't like to go digital. I saw a couple of movies, and I didn't like this. I was fighting very hard to stay on film until I did a movie in Vancouver, I think it was, and we shot Panavision film. And then I started to get a lot of complaints from the producers and actually a little bit from the directors. Well, why is it so moving around? There was a grain, of course, because that's what it does. And people were starting, we don't want to have that. We want to noise reduce everything, So we shot on film and noise reduce that looks like video. That was a little bit weird. So I changed slowly to digital, but I was really against it for a long time. But right now, I think it works extremely well for me. I have no problems. And then I start to shoot master primes as well. Again, lenses that are doing a really good job. But I think I changed a little bit later, maybe to film or to digital. We did a movie in Poland where we shot everything. That was the first movie actually I shot with digital, and we didn't have it DRT because it's a Danish movie. Nobody knew what a DIT was. So we shot it as we shot on film. So I have a false color in the viewfinder. And it works pretty well, and I'm still shooting without loot. I'm just shooting as I was shooting film. I have 709. I'd make the color of the day I like to have. But the movies I'm doing right now, the color palette is so specific, for example, on Frankenstein or John Wick movies. So our dailies on the day, the color palette from the dailies is going to be the same as the final movie. We are not changing the colors in the DI. We are changing the contrast a little bit, power windows and stuff like that. But we are never changing the colors because the set is designed, the costume design, the hair and makeup, everything is blending so specific. So we are not, the movies I'm doing, we are not going in, or this should be amber, whatever. If it have to be amber, we are going to do that on the day, but we are not doing amber in the camera, we are doing amber, changing the light, a little bit like we did when we shot on film. But it just works better for me. I think the freedom, as I talked about before, is like now you can do whatever you think is good for you. And it works really well for me, not having the LUT.
Okay, so basically neither Dan nor Tony likes to work with a LUT in the camera.
I don't. And we are too old to
No.
do that. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I can't work with the LUT either. I mean, I think the transition, one point I should make, and was that like Dan said, I want to be able to shoot on set what will end up in the final film. And that's not always possible, and people have opinions. But I think one thing, the transition from film, and I'll just make a brief example, is that, we went from this, which was an Arton. It fitted. It's like a cat. I shot with the Penelope, the 35mm version, and it's light, and there's not loads of crap all over the place. And we went to this. That's the first Arri Alexa. I mean, it reminds me of a 1970s Volvo estate car, and the ergonomics have disappeared completely. And it's like a lump of metal. And instead of, here there's the Arton. It's like a cat. He fits on my shoulder, and it's a beautiful thing. You can go now, Roger. But my point is just, and one of my criticisms, I always strip the camera back. I find, focus pullers put all this stuff all over it. And if I'm operating, which I don't do all the time because I love lighting, but if it's a handheld project, yes, I will. But I strip it back. I try and get back to simplicity. And I think that applies to lenses as well. I just feel there's so many, if you're in the kitchen, you're the head cook, and you've got 20 sous chefs and a big film crew. You want something that you want to forget about the technical stuff and light and use the camera. And so that's in a way what I'm after, and the reason why I'm always in a way searching for simple solutions, which are often technically complex.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have the kitchen analogy there, and it's good, and I'd like to get back to that. But since we were talking about your careers and how you began, and I'm interested in about at what point in your early career. Dan mentioned that sort of the production told you're going to work with this camera and these 4 lenses, so there wasn't all that many options. But about what time in your careers were you able to sort of pick a project or say no to a project? So about when would that have been?
I cannot say exactly when it's happening, but when you're getting, when you're young and you're 25, you're just happy to see a film camera and be in a film set. And that's the same. I have the same feeling now. I'm a little bit older now, but I love to be in a film set. I like to make movies. But right now, for me, movie making is about the director. It's like, because that's the person you're making the movie together with or for. So, you just have to have the right directors that can choose you, or you can choose them to make the right movies. Because if you have to start from scratch all the time, sometimes it's really, really difficult. So for me, it's more the director. And I have a lot of really good directors in Denmark before I moved to work more abroad. So I've worked together with a couple of really nice guys in Denmark. And when those movies starts to get a little bit bigger, we could just go in and said, we want to have that and modern equipment. Of course, everybody was against us because it was much cheaper for the studios to just use what they have in the closet. And we said, no, we don't want to go cook, or we want to do whatever, because again, we tested a lot of stuff those days, what was the look for that movie. So we was changing looks from movie to movie, and I still does that, and it's not a sales talk from Leica at all this. But after, I'm a big fan of large format filmmaking, Alexa 65. So I was looking a lot for lenses that worked for me. And then I just heard about the Thalia lenses. I checked them, and I was just falling in love with them right away. And I've shot with them since. And it's not, of course, there are issues because the wide angles we're using a lot is so slow. You guys have to figure out to do it fast. This is insane. At 24 millimeter, there's 3.5. It's like, come on. We're 2000 and whatever, it's 60, 26. No, I'm just saying. So that, of course, is painful. We have a lens that's so slow. But it doesn't matter so much for me anymore, because I'm shooting the same T-stop the whole movie. I'm shooting on T4 because I have that slow lens. So that is my base. I'm always shooting T4. And so if I'm shooting outside, I'm putting ND filters inside the camera. And I'm shooting with a diffusion filter as well, but I'm putting that inside the camera, behind the lens. Arri's making this, or whoever that's making it, could be I don't know. They're making this click-on diffusion filters. And I think that's fantastic, because then you get a diffusion in the highlights, but you don't get that in the blackness. And that combination with a big sensor and really good lenses, sometimes that can be too sharp for my taste. So we have this black promist inside the camera, and it's a combination. I don't know how many people that know about it, but I think it's a combination that's fantastic. So I'm very pleased about it. I think a lot of people should try that, because of course it's a little bit like Tony saying, the camera focus puller is putting so much stuff on the camera so you cannot see the camera anymore. But of course they have to take that off to put the filter on when you're changing lens. And when we're changing exposure, we have to change the ND filter as well. But it's just a gadget that's amazing, I think. It's a really good tool, because then I got a lens flare for a high quality lens instead of getting a filter flare in a filter that's in front of the lens. So that works very, very well for me.
Okay.
I totally agree. I completely agree. And I mean, I've still got a few sets of Christian Dior number 10 stockings, but I think, you know, building on what Dan's saying, it's being able to filter behind the lens is just always seemingly the best place to do it, and avoiding, if there are flares, Dan said this already, I want to create them. I don't want, and I can do it also in post so easily. These things, the power of post these days. So yeah, I totally endorse. And also full frame. The LEITZ primes cover up to 35. Unfortunately, they don't cover the rest, but they're very fast. They're T1.8. So I'll often shoot, I think Mr. Malcolm's List movie I did with LEITZ primes. I think I shot the whole thing at T2.8. Apart from difficult night shots where I didn't want to ramp up the ASA, and I just went down to T1.8, and the lenses just looked the same.
Yeah, very nice.
Okay, thank you, Dan and Tony. We kind of got off topic a little bit, because I was asking you in your career about what time you were able to pick projects, and I know from earlier, Tony, you started out on documentaries, and back then you'd have a pretty full dance card, like you could be booked a year in advance.
Yeah, well,
Tony.
Document Films was this very special place in London, in Soho, and they gave you gravitas. It gave you access to these autorial documentary makers, and we had two art-ons. You've seen my first LTR, and then I had two prods, and everything we shot was on film. And yes, we would be booked. I think Mike Healy and I tended to be booked about a year ahead. And it was a real golden period. And I think documentary is still really important to me. I really enjoy going back and working with a small crew. I insist on a sound recordist and try and get an assistant, but it's just the freedom and having to do things in the moment and having to be very, very engaged in the project. And I think you asked me by email, you said, you know, do you regard yourself as I think it was a political filmmaker? And I said no, because yes, I feel most happy making political films, fiction or documentary, but I love doing fantasy epics. I've loved more than anything working with the brothers Quay and Carnival Row, but it's the director who is the political filmmaker, not me. I'm supporting their vision. I'm underscoring their project, and I feel very much more concerned with how I bring out the emotion of the story, the characters, how they reveal themselves, than the politics. So the answer to that is no. But anyway, I veered off your question, so I'll stop.
Yeah, but it kind of segues into another part of the same question, which Dan has already answered a bit, because so what are the criteria for picking a project? Now that you're in a position that you can, you're not forced to pick a project to pay the rent, but you can be picky and choose the one you like. So Dan mentioned directors as a criteria for picking a project. And Tony, I think you were into script as well.
Yeah, I mean, a good example would be Fleabag. Well, first of all, I don't always have a choice. You know, I absolutely don't. There are moments when I've got way too much work being offered, and there's other times I don't. And that, I think you're as good as your last project. There's so many reasons, but Fleabag would be a good example where I was sent the script. I was told this was a special project. I read it. I just didn't get it. I didn't understand the comedy. Comedy is a genre I'm not really interested in. You know, I was known as the guy who likes period drama. So I gave it to my wife, and she came back an hour later and said, "You're out of your sad little mind. This is absolutely brilliant. This is the female perspective of what it's like, and go and meet her." And so I went to meet Phoebe and just thought she was Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And I thought she was completely brilliant. And she immediately said, "I want the camera to be part of the company. I want it to be a portal to the audience." And so I can get it really wrong. And I think this is a key element about cinematography. I am experienced. I have lit lots of different genres, but I do often get things wrong as well. And hopefully I correct those mistakes rapidly with the experience that I have. But, and I think like Dan, you know, and I very much admire Dan's collaborations with directors over a period of time, because getting a shorthand with them makes so much difference. So, so yes, seeking out directors is the key.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And we were into the kitchen analogy a little bit here, and it's interesting, and I think you're both on the same page a bit there. I think because the patron at the restaurant should be more concerned with what the chef does rather than where the tomatoes come from. I think we spoke about that a bit, Tony, if you remember. Meaning to the moviegoer, the final result should be about the movie itself, the emotions it evokes in the audience, and the technique should not necessarily be so apparent, or what equipment was used or something like that. Tony.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I guess my point from documentary, I'm going to contradict myself here completely, was that, you know, my sense always has been to try and move when people move and hide the cinematography. I don't want to be aware of it. And I think that's led me often to, which isn't to say I don't move the camera. Carnival Row, I moved it all the time with wire rigs and lots of Steadicam. And but I try and do so in a way that's not ostentatious. And watching Dan's Frankenstein yesterday, I was just amazed by, I was immersed in the story and I forgot about the camera movement. And the camera's moving every shot. It's constantly moving, and it's going from wide to close up. And I thought this was, you know, I salute you, because it's an incredible achievement to do that and yet still not be aware of the cinematography. And I think that also comes down to the lighting. You know, as Dan said earlier, you can do anything. But when I see single source lighting and light that drops off, I'm immediately in a safe place that starts from naturalism. And I think that's one element why I don't feel attracted. I don't feel aware of the cinematography, because there is a starting point of naturalism. But I'm interested to hear what Dan has to say, really.
Yes. Okay. So Dan and kitchen and tomatoes.
Yeah. You know, Frankenstein, let's talk about that for a second. You know, we shot that, I think we shot 95, maybe 90% of the whole movie on the Thalia, this slow, wide angle Thalia lens. I'm just kidding. You know, so we shot 95% of that. And we shot that. I think the beauty of large format cinematography is like the focus length on the wide angle. It's still a 24 millimeter. It's not like a 19 or 18 or whatever. So when you're coming into it, because we didn't shot one single shot of Frankenstein where the operator was looking into the camera. All shots was on a crane or jib arm or a Steadicam. So the camera was moving all the time. But a lot of times we start on, we saw the whole set on a 24 millimeter, and then we went into a big close-ups and shot like back where the crane was. We didn't saw the crane, of course, but we just shot like 250 degrees. So all the light is outside the sets. I never have lights inside because we are shooting so much atmospheric, and because we're seeing so much of the set, so there's no space at all for the lights. But I'm using the windows as a gobo for the light. So I'm really using the windows like a kind of a gobo. So very, very much single source lighting. But the way Guillermo is shooting, for example, he knows exactly where he's going in and out. And of course, that's a fantastic thing as a cinematographer, because we are shooting what he needs in the movie. We are not like doing 500 pictures we're never going to use. So he's using a big wide shot coming into our close-ups. And sometimes that's a scene. Sometimes it's just a reverse, but it's not like we are doing inserts and we are doing a lot of like overs. So, and of course, as a cinematographer, it's a dream to work with a guy like him, because this is so precise and we know where we are coming in and out. And we are using a lot of. We are using a lot of time. Excuse me?
No, please continue.
We are spending a lot of time to pre-light. So all the set is pre-lit, So because pre-lighting is not only for the cinematographer. Pre-lighting is for the director, for the production designer, for everybody to see how does a set actually look before we start shooting. And I think that's if you, as a cinematographer, can bring pre-lighting into your film world, it's a big help for everybody. Of course, as a cinematographer, it's nice to know where you're coming, but for everybody, which you're shooting, even on location, we are pre-lighting all the time, because this is the first time everybody sees the set as it's going to be in the movie. And it's a fantastic help. And talking about the camera movement, Guillermo's talking to the grips on a headset. So he's talking to the grips and the operator when we are shooting. So he's where he's going, but he's a little bit improvised, going a little bit right, going a little bit, go up, go a little bit down. So it's a very fluid camera, even it's very precise organized. And that's, of course, sometimes, especially for the focus puller, Doug Lavender, because he doesn't know exactly where we're going to be. We're going to be around here in the end, but it's, and that's the same with the light, we know they're going to be approximately here. So it's a very imprecise, but it's very precise in the same hand.
Yes, okay. And I'd like to linger a bit on the Frankenstein as well here. There are lots of real candles in the setups as well done, aren't there?
We are doing everything for real. We don't like to do anything, as if we want to have the story in Frankenstein is like when the creature's coming into birth, he sees the sunshine his first time. So we are shooting a lot of times into brutes or dinos or 20K. So we are shooting straight into the light all the time. And of course you need a lens that can handle that. So everything is done for real. It's all the candles is double witch candles, like it seems like going back to Barry Lyndon that did that as well. Right. So we try to do as much as we can, as possible. We built a ship on the parking lot in Toronto, the full ship. So it's very ambitious, and of course, again, when you work together with directors like him, it's a pleasure, because there's nothing is good enough. It's just the perfect, and that's what we're trying to do. And of course, that is it's a dream work as a cinematographer to have all the tools you need to making the scenes. So it is. Right. We're doing as much as we can for real.
Okay, and watching it, I felt you mentioned Berlinden here, and I felt that the camera work was reminiscent a bit about the classical early 70s Kubrick movies like Clockwork Orange or Berlinden, going a really wide angle lens and playing scenes in that wide angle lens, and you stay enough away from your performers so that they don't get distorted or something, but we get almost like a world view in every shot. We see the whole set, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, thank you. But that is because the sensor is so big. So when you have the big sensor, the 24 millimeters is a super wide angle. But when you're coming into close up, it's still at 24, so it's not distorting so much. If you shot super 35, you have to shoot on, let's say, 18. And then you're coming into a close-up like this, and you're going to get a lot of distortions because it's so wide lens. But you don't have that on the Alexa 65. And I think that works. It's really nice.
Okay, so you can avoid some of the distortion simply because it's large format.
Yeah, because it's a 24 millimeter. It's not and the Thalia lens is so straight. It's like Tony said before. It's like from side to side. It's like it's so square. There's no distortion in the sides. The only problem with that 24 is it's so slow.
Okay.
But that is the Thalia lenses. If you shot with some other lenses, I'm sure you have distortions in the side, and that's okay. But we don't like that. We like a lens that's not making the actors look too weird. But we are really close to them, and that's another issue, Tony. When we talk about, it's difficult to light them because you're coming in with a big hot head, and you're coming in with a big crane, and you're really close to them. So light them again a little bit beautiful. It's sometimes kind of a challenge, but it's cool. When it works, it works.
Dan, I have a question if I could follow up on that. How for Frankenstein, how important was balancing realism with a bit of a fantastical, elevated element of reality in that film?
I think it was super important because we don't have to talk about Frankenstein. I'm just saying, Guillermo wants to shoot a period movie that was looking very modern, and that's like the camera movement, the lights. But it was for him, it was very important. It was not looks like an old period movie. It has to be a period movie that was shot very modern, and I think that's the moving cameras helping a lot there, of course, and the light as well. So for him, for everybody, it was very important. But I think the moving cameras is helping to tell that story more modern. We try that.
Okay. So I have a question for Tony. Since Tony also happens to be a pilot, which I found fascinating, and the thing in preparing for this, the thing that you told me, which I was sort of surprised to hear, is that you don't find flying all that challenging as cinematography, and I think to most people would think that being a pilot is the really, really tricky and challenging
I would
thing.
say so.
Well, I think the thing you were relating to was flying the Atlantic alone in a single engine, 6-seater. And I went to see The Seventh Seal. We've talked about Gunnar. I think Bergman's first DP shot it. And I went to see it before I went to see it before I did that film. And The Seventh Seal is about a chess game between a knight returning from war and the Grim Reaper of Death. And who wins the chess game decides if the knight, lives or dies. And in a way, the chess game, it's a sort of brilliant metaphor for man's attempt to defy mortality, gravity, and through his accomplishments, perhaps most vividly through artistic means, the need to create that vital work that will survive the author's death. Now, I think that flying's like driving a bus, really. I've 4,000 hours and a commercial license, and you get to a point, and you can do it, and you do it. You do it by the book. And yes, flying into southern Greenland in terrible weather, where you've got 4 fjords, and you decide if you go down the wrong one, you're going to have to back up your aircraft, which I haven't learned how to do yet. But cinematography is just so much more complex. It's such an amazing thing to do, and it involves so many people who you've got to manage and sort of harness for your vision. And directors vary enormously in how they interact with cinematographers. And you're trying to be an artisan and an artist in a way. And I guess I find it constantly challenging. And, you know, if I'm on a massive set like Carnival Row, I feel stage fright the first day. If I'm on a small little feature with very little money, I feel stage fright again the first couple of days. And I constantly feel that I'm evolving. It just never feels static. And I think that's what makes it just such a brilliant job. And I feel deeply privileged to do it. And it's just such a great job. I haven't answered your question, I'm sorry. But
I think you did. So that was fine. Dan, do you have any comment in general about the complexity or the challenges of the craft of cinematography in itself?
Yeah, of course, I totally agree with Tony. You know, I think I always want to do something that's better than I did the day before. And I'm always like, not always, but you know, you have to push yourself. And of course, that's good when you're working together with directors that want to push you as well. And you want to do the director's movie. But when you have these pre-lighting days, it helps a lot with, you know, getting into a panic mode, because you have pre-lighting and you know exactly, you have a little bit feeling about, because otherwise you have a lot of times you're coming into a set and you don't know exactly, you have to light that in half an hour, because I've been there as well. Of course, you're pre-lighting, you're coming in, your crew call is 8 and you're coming in 7:30, you have to have an hour to light the set and you have to shoot like for 8 hours. And then that was the history in Denmark, because it was super low budget. It was not low budget, but there was not small money. So as I said before, if you have any chances to pre-light as a cinematographer, that's going to take all that stress away. But again, you have to push yourself. You have to try to do something that's better than you have done before. And that's, of course, that's a struggle all the time. But I think a cinematographer work is the best in the world. You know, I'm so passionate about what I'm doing and I love it. But again, of course, I know all that. You're getting nervous. You know, what can I do now? You're doing a close-up of an actor. It doesn't work for you, and you just feel you have to go. And you're just in panic about what can I do? And then you figure out something. But I think that's the beauty of being a cinematographer. Is like you're on an express train, and it has to look amazing, but you have to do it fast. But pre-lighting is helping. And I think that's one of the reasons I like these high quality lenses, because I've been there before when you have something that doesn't look right and you cannot get rid of the lens flare, for example, because you have a light somewhere and it's just keep going in. And so I like these lenses. They're not giving me any trouble, it's just giving me exactly what I like.
And in pre-lighting here, you mean basically lighting the space so that you're free to move around in that you don't have to relight as you shoot then?
Yeah, no, it's just like, what is the feeling? What is the atmosphere on the scene? And I'm pre-lighting with my camera team and my DIT, because I cannot. When I was shooting on film, you know, I could look into the eyepiece and I knew exactly how it's going to look like, because my lighting meter and my eyepiece was my best friends. I knew exactly when you look into the eyepiece, you could see where it's falling off. But I have to admit, I cannot do that anymore when I'm shooting digital. You know, digital have changed everything for me. And I remember I was so arrogant in the beginning when I was still shooting on film, and those young guys were shooting on digital, and they always have a monitor around them. I said, those guys doesn't know what they're doing. And I'm exactly there right now. I'm looking into the monitor all the time, because my lighting meter and the camera doesn't do the same. So I'm stopped using lighting meter. I'm missing that every minute, because I think walking around a set with your lighting meter was fantastic, but it doesn't work for me. So I'm using, when I'm pre-lighting, it's a full set, you know, everything is lit, but it's going to be the camera team and the DIT as well. So using the monitor as my tool, and that's It's just the way it works for me. But it's like, again, this is the feeling we want to have in the set. Of course, we are turning around and all that, but I'm pre-lighting for what I think is going to be the master for the first day of shooting.
Right. But once you start working on that set, then you have to adjust the lightman,
Oh yeah, all
the
the time.
lighting
Yes.
for every shot. Yes.
For everything, for all the shots. It's just where's the master? What is the feeling? Should that chair be there? Should that table be there? It's for everybody. It's like, and of course it's a huge help for me, but it's a huge help for the director and the production designer, the set designer. So that
Right.
just, how does it look? Because those guys have only seen the set with the house lights on. Everything is super flat and not too nice.
Right.
And I think it helps a lot for everybody.
Right. It's interesting, Dan, that you mentioned Bergman's first cameraman, Gunnar Fischer, early on, that you met him, because I had the privilege of talking to him many years ago, and he said that a key thing for him was to light the master first, to not fall for the temptation to start with the close-up or something, and then you back out and you can't match what you've done in the close-up.
A nightmare. You have to start with the master first, and that's good when you're starting with the master and you're coming into a close-up. But
Yeah.
I think Gunnar Fischer was fantastic. He was like an old master, like unbelievable.
Yes.
It's as you said, the Seven Seals. It's a masterpiece.
Absolutely. And Seventh Seal and Wild Strawberries shot in the same year as well, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Another topic, if I may, is that, Tony, you have actually directed. And Dan, have you felt the temptation to sort of switch career and start directing, or do you feel
I like
cinematography?
to be a cinematographer. I don't have any dreams. I don't think I can do that. Then you have your doubts all the time. I've doubts enough of being a cinematographer. If I should be doubting about directing as well, I was like, oh my God. No, but I have no dreams about that. I've never thought about it.
Okay.
But who knows? I don't have any dreams about that.
Okay. And Tony, you've had experience with both. Do you find directing challenging?
I think directing for me was partly enforced by others, and it's like acting. I hated doing it. I really hated it. And I did a big cinema documentary called Mustang, the Hidden Kingdom, which I ended up working with the Dalai Lama for 2 years. And, it was a fascinating project. And I love shooting landscape. Peter Weir is one of my favorite directors because he embodies so much emotion in the landscape, and the way he sets people against landscapes and the juxtapositions and the contradictions I find fascinating. So on that level, yes, because you have a freedom. But no, I love working with directors, and shooting fiction, I couldn't imagine being the director. I would hate it. And I think I've discovered that to me, we're playing with a giant train set every day. We think it's a matter of life and death. I have a good friend who's a surgeon, and for him it really is a matter of life and death. And he works with the Da Vinci machine. He operates inside people. He can do so remotely and remove an organ in Brazil, sitting here in London. And
Wow.
Absolutely. And the thing that amazes me is that it's this mix of technology and artistry. And I keep telling him, you're an artist, you're a Renaissance man, you're not just a brilliant surgeon, but you do these things using all these different elements, particularly your hands, which for a surgeon are key. And I think it makes me think, we got the train set, we're the lucky guys. This is an amazing amalgamation of different skills. And I think one thing that Dan talked about was, and I brought up, was stage fright. Why do I use a single source, for instance? And I started as a point of departure because naturalism, single source lighting, it gives me a way in. Practical lights, they give me a way in to think about how am I going to light the scene? How am I going to underscore the emotion of the scene? And I think the other thing is that, I have embraced LEDs, but I still use the big source. I'm still lighting with Dinos all the time and 20Ks, because how they drop off. And, Edward Hopper is probably the most obvious example of someone who creates a story off the canvas, and where light and shadow do more than just create a mood, but they sort of harbor and reveal the thoughts and emotions of the character in the picture and frame. And so if you've got a single source and it hits here, I'm interested in the darkness and what that reveals. And I think Conrad Hall was brilliant at, one of the best at creating the sense that there was more. And if that person turns away and he reveals that to us, the darkness is so often what is fascinating and holds the emotion.
Okay, thank you. I didn't really know where to put it in, but I think maybe this could be a good point here, because one of the prep questions which I sent to both you guys and Tony, we had time to talk a little bit about it, is that it's possible to see movies or the cinema experience for the viewer almost like a Rorschach test, that when you see a film, you think, what would I have done in that situation, and you identify with various characters and things like that. And Tony, you mentioned Seventh Seal and driving a single engine airplane over the North Atlantic. And could you elaborate a bit on that? Because I know you did it earlier on.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I was trying to describe, and I'm sorry, I was wittering on again, was the sense that the film is about, what you leave afterwards, what your footprint on the world, and particularly in the sense of a sort of artistic one. And I just think it's such a thing of hot air, and I think, watching the Seventh Seal before I flew the Atlantic, I saw it in a completely different way. I was kind of saying checkmate to the Dr. Death sitting beside me. I imagined I had Dr. Death with me all the way across, and we were playing chess. And maybe this is the crazy imagination that comes with making films, but no, it made the film much deeper for me, because I was doing something that was about mortality in a sense. It was proximitous, and there was the sense of the Grim Reaper sitting on my shoulder. So I guess, yes, I experience films. It depends on my emotional state. It depends on what's going on in my life with my family. And often I'll look at films and try really hard. If they're really good films, I like to forget about the cinematography. I have to watch them a second time to think about carefully how they were lit. But no, I mean, as Dan said, I'll light something, think that was really good. And then I'll look at it, at the end of the day with the DIT and think, oh, fuck, why didn't I do that? Like it could have been better. And so I guess it's really it's a challenge, always. Much bigger challenge than driving a plane.
And Dan, if we continue with the films as Rorschach test, the questions of mortality and death, both by natural causes, man's inhumanity to man, that is all over Frankenstein.
Yeah, but again, I'm just so much a nerd. When I see a movie, I can only see the cinematographer. It's so bad. And of course, we see a really good movie, you're forgetting that. But when you see Apocalypse Now, you forget how Storaro did that, because the movie is so powerful. When you do I'm Cuba, when you see I'm Cuba, the story is amazing. And then you say, oh, well, how did they shot that? Everything handheld, but the camera's in there. But I'm so much into like my world about light, so I'm a little bit like It's hard for me to forget it. I try, and I forget it sometimes, but I'm bad. I think light is my life right now. And of course, storytelling, but storytelling is so much together with the director. The director is taking more and more over the blocking and how he wants to shoot it, how he or she wants to shoot it. But the lighting is much more on my shoulders. Of course, I do that together with the director. But as we talked about before, when you're shooting with John Wick, Chad, for example, he's so much into how he wants to shoot the fights because he knows exactly what he wants to do. And of course, we talk about everything of how do we want to do it, blah, blah, blah. But I think the directors is the one that's sitting in the editing room later on and cut it together. And we just try to support that as much as we can.
Actually, it's nice that you mentioned the John Wick series because you shot the second, third, and fourth movie in the series, and I saw a masterclass you did a few years ago with the great Andreas Fischer Hansen as moderator, and you talked about what it was like working on the action sequences. It was actually so fascinating that I think our audience as well would be eager to hear that how when you worked on these action sequences with Keanu Reeves, it was so taxing for him that you had to switch between fighting and car chases back and forth. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
I think when you're shooting action movies with those guys, for example, Keanu Reeves, you have to see it as a cinematographer. You have to see it like you're shooting a ballet, because it is actually a ballet between some actors and the camera. Because the camera is going to be, when we are shooting those movies, the camera is going to be very active as well. Steadicam is all over the place, but it's not just rushing around and doing something. It's a really choreographed. It's the third part. It's the third actor in that action sequence, and I think. Chad and me are talking a lot about, this is like shooting a ballet, because you have to tell the story and you have to tell the beauty way of it. It's a fantasy world because Keanu Reeves is getting killed 1,500 times and he's still surviving. So it's again a kind of a fantasy world, but it's just, we looked a lot about it as it's a ballet. And I think that helps a little bit to understand it, how we are doing it. But again, I don't understand all this like fighting sequence because I cannot see that. Even though I've done 3 movies, I cannot see the difference between that kick and another kick. But of course, the director can do that, and he knows exactly how to shoot that piece of action. And of course, the color palette is like another world of that series.
Right. Yes. And Tony, you spoke about playing with a toy train set earlier on, so that brings us into the toy store shelf here, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the spherical lenses and anamorphic lenses, because I know we both like shooting anamorphic. So, and Dan, you've shot a lot of anamorphic, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, but again, we shot when I came to John Wick movies, the first movie was shot with another cinematographer, and we just chatted me this guy. We want to do something else because those guys shot, if I remember, they shot with a lot of Vantage lenses, a lot of flare, So I want to go master primes. So we did master anamorphic. But the problem with those, the problem with master anamorphic was not flaring enough for us. We couldn't get the highlights kick. So I talked to Ari in New York. And I have this, like Tony said before, like in the old days when you shot commercially, you always have you glue a nylon stock behind the lens. And of course, all the rental houses hate you because you came back with that lens. Oh, you forgot to take it away. So we have this discussion, why are we not going with a net on that? And we tried that, and I don't know why, but it doesn't work for me on a digital format, because it works really well on film, but it doesn't work for me on digital. So somebody at Area New York said, why are we not, somebody said, why are we not putting a fishing line in behind, gluing a fishing line on the lens behind on the mount? And of course, everybody said, you guys are crazy. So we did actually that. We did that, glue some fishing lines on the back of the master anamorphic. And it works fantastic. We just got this flare. You know, you don't see them and you don't have a highlights, but you have a car coming in or spots in the ceiling or something. You got this flare, and you know, we were using blue fishing lines or black fishing lines. And it works perfect because it doesn't touch the image except when you have a flare. So we did that on number 2 and 3. Shot master anamorphic, and then on number 4 we went LF and what is the name of the alpha lenses?
Alpha.
Yeah, alpha lenses, and that was fantastic as well. But the 2 first one we shot anamorphic all the way through, and we did the same on number 4. But I always have a spherical lens in the back because if something happens and you have too much whatever. And the problem with anamorphic is the close focus is just a mess, isn't it? You know, you cannot get close enough. And the wide angle is a lot of times not wide enough. But otherwise, I love those lenses. And now we're shooting, I'm preparing a movie called Highlander here, when we are shooting a new Arri 1.3 squeeze for the 65. So that's going to be a split between Thalia lenses and the anamorphic lenses. So we're jumping between those 2 lenses now. Hope it's going to be good.
And Tony, you mentioned you felt you could get much of the anamorphic look in terms of bokeh and those things, I think, with the LEITZ primes that you are so enamored with.
Well,
The
yeah,
spherical.
I guess I felt I could. I mean, like Dan said, LEITZ cleverly made a filter holder for the back that will take the stockings, and I then ladder them to do exactly what Dan is talking about as well. But I guess I find that I have shot lots of anamorphic. I was shooting anamorphic last week. But I like, particularly if it's a visual effects heavy project, there's big advantages to being spherical, and there's a lot more lenses. And I think when you're doing a film or a TV project, you often end up with key lenses and do so much of the project on those. And so I think, yeah, with the LEITZ ones, I've come to a happy place with full frame. And feeling that I can get more of an anamorphic look. It's not the same, it's different, but I guess I like it because I don't feel aware of it again. And then if I wanted to flare, I can make it flare. But it just depends on the project, you know, it just so much depends on the project, the director, and what it's about. So I have no hard and fast rules, really. I think I just like feeling that I can be in control of those things, like flare. I hate not being in control of flare. I hate getting flares off filters. It pisses me off, and spend time trying to get rid of them. And then I sort of think, and I can make them so easily. Do you know what I mean? And I guess one thing is, you know, I did a few films where I mixed lenses. I'd use one lens for one look and one for another. And I just guess I found that it was a bit of I wasn't quite sure of the truth of it, that actually I could do much more lighting wise or adjusting things in post-production. And so I tend to stick with one set of lenses.
Yes. Well, a follow-up question here that sort of goes in the other direction, because sometimes on a movie you want to accentuate that this right here in the story is actual reality, and this next scene here is something that might have happened, and then another scene is a flashback or a dream sequence. And so I asked you guys, or I wrote in an email to you guys, if you worked on projects where you've had deliberately have different kinds of lenses or brands of lenses, to represent different realities. So say, for instance, that brand A anamorphic is here and now reality, but brand B vintage lenses is a dream sequence and so on. So who wants to go first? Maybe Tony?
So I go quickly because I'm going to have to. All I'd say to that is just look. In post I can vignette. In post I can create glare, and I can do it so quickly and so easily. I can do it in camera with filters, and as Dan said, I like black pro mist because they soften the highlights, and I can control the contrast in the blacks. And so I feel that the difference between a lens is far more subliminal. It's much less than the effect I want to create for those differences in moods between something like a flashback. So I feel I'd do it much more with light, and I feel much more comfortable. And lots of cinematographers will disagree, but I feel much more comfortable doing it with light.
Right. But
I've got to disappear for 1 minute. I'll be back. 1 minute.
Okay. All right.
I have
so
done
Dan,
I have done it jumping between spherical and anamorphic. But again, when you're shooting large format, it's interesting. We did a lot of tests on one show we did. The depth of field is different on anamorphic compared to spherical lenses. But when you're shooting a Lexus 65 large format, the difference is getting much smaller, because if you're shooting, and again, the test we did on the Thalia lenses, but you're shooting let's say you're shooting 2.8, and you're shooting a test with anamorphic lenses, the depth of field or the lack of depth of field is getting very close to each other because the sensor is so big. Because those days we did the test, we could only do that with the alpha lenses, where we shot LF instead of instead of 65. So I think it depends how big the sensor is. But I have done a show where we're jumping between anamorphic and spherical, and it works really well for me. But again, you can do a lot of post. I just try to do as much as I can do in the camera, because then I know where we are. Because I'm a little bit afraid of post, but you're losing control. So if I shoot a lens, I know that's going to be the lens anamorphic is going to be. But I've done that both. I've done movies where I've shot half of the movie with anamorphic and the other one with spherical.
Right. And in that case, Dan, was that to represent the different realities, or points of perspective, or was it for some other reason?
No, different realities.
Okay.
And I hope it works. Again, it's. I don't think it's something. It's not like a lot of people are changing format and stuff like that. And I think that's really cool as well. But I've never done that. I've just done where we change lenses. That period of movies shot in anamorphic, and the other period of movies is shot in a spherical.
Okay.
And it's of course it's a drag, because you really need to know the schedule, what kind of equipment you're going to have that day, because nobody wants to carry two expensive sets of lenses for like many, many weeks. So you have to be clever about bringing stuff back to the rental house. And of course, sometimes when the schedule is changed, like, oh my God, those lenses we don't have here. So it's not so easy, but we did it and it works pretty well. But it's the camera department have to be on the toes figure out to get the right equipment days.
Right. Tony, I think you mentioned you did something similar on Get Millie Black.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I did, yeah. I mean, we were in Jamaica, and it's a sort of dark noir thriller about the LGBT community there, and a sort of post-colonialist political vibe. But yeah, and then the London scenes, which were very gritty and much more handheld. And I went to the LEITZ. We shot anamorphic in Jamaica, and then I went to the LEITZ primes, and it's a subtle difference, but it helped. But it also helped me because I wanted close focus. I wanted to be able to go really in on wide lenses, and that was one of the thoughts. But also to give it a slight different flavor. And as Dan says, I mean, previously I've shot things Super 16 again. And that I like for flashbacks, and or Super 8 even, if you can get it processed. So grain is a good, what triggers our memory? What triggers the memory of our audience into thinking that it's from a different era? So I think maybe I should moderate what I've said, that in a way, yeah, lenses are important, but they're subtle. They're more subtle than the other things.
Okay. So a question for Dan and Tony again here. Then, what do you like the most of being on a feature film set? When you're working on a feature film and you're on set, what is it that you enjoy the most about that part of the experience?
I think the art of making movies for me is like, that's the fantastic. You're telling a story together with the director, together with the crew. What I love about movie making is it's like artwork where you're doing that with a lot of people. Of course, there's only one captain, but I think everybody's lifting the project together, and I think that's it's amazing. And you can tell a story with light and camera movement, and I love that. But I love the teamwork on the film crew. I really like you're not alone. I like you have to understand everybody's carrying this movie on the shoulders. Of course, the director is a director, and I'm a cinematographer, but I just need all the help I can get for everybody. And I like that teamwork, the feeling about you are maybe not a family, but you are like a bunch of people that really wants to do the movie together. I love that.
So, Tony?
Well, many similar things. I think it takes me back to my Swedish childhood and Emil and Pippi Longstocking, of fantasy worlds, of playing with dolls' houses, which I love doing, and train sets, and then you're doing it for real, and we think it's a matter of life and death, and you're working with a crew, and you have to get everybody to work well, and then just the joy of lighting, of trying to bring emotion through what you're doing with cinematography. It's such a gift. And then to do it with a sort of army-like machine, and to have a lot of control around how you underscore emotion. And the director's doing one major part of it, and you're following his vision, but you do have a big voice to creatively. I mean, I think Storaro kept saying that, he lights, he's painting with light all the time. And it sounded a bit preposterous to me. But at the same time, in a way, you're trying to reveal people and reveal emotion and underscore it and create a story off the canvas. So, I mean, God, what's not to like? It's epic. And intimate. It's sort of the intimate and the epic.
So a follow-up question to that, since both you guys love that experience, is there something you're not very fond of working on feature film?
Well, I don't get enough sleep, and particularly, and doing politics. I think, because I do quite a lot of big TV series, there's a lot of politics, and it's quite sapping. You go in and out early to pre-light, and then at the end of the day, there's politics. So I don't enjoy that very much, but it's become a major part of our jobs, I think, and I don't get enough sleep.
No, I know
So
that's the same. No, that's the same. The sleep is an issue. But again, when I've been so lucky the last couple of years, working together with very great directors. So the politics is going away from me. I just try to shoot the director's vision together with me, of course, but I understand what you say, Tony, sometimes you have to fight for something. And I think but it's just getting easier when you're working together with directors who really have a strong vision. And this is what we want to do. And of course, small movies, big movies, there's a lot of talk about money all the time, but that's the nature of the beast. It's like, it's getting so expensive.
right.
And I spoke with my director, Chad, for some days ago and said, why are we not going back to the roots, like 2 cameras, like make it very, very, but we cannot do that anymore. It's just seems, it seems it's gone. But it's, the discussion about money, that's something, but it's just the way it is. It's just, the movies are getting big and it's super expensive and you have to try to work around that. But I think the whole way to make movies have changed so much, from when I was starting. Because the crew was so small, the story was much smaller, and you have to make a lot of decisions because you cannot afford to hang around, do everything. But now everybody wants you to be able to shoot all the way around all the time. Yeah.
I have a question related to the lack of sleep, kind of. Do either of you, Tony and Dan, feel that there's a certain point in the day, maybe it's after 8 hours of work or 10 hours, where the quality starts to fall off a little bit of filmmaking, where you would say, okay, if we had stopped here and just shot the rest of it the next day, we'd have maybe had a little bit better performance or better lighting setup? Is there a diminished return working long hours, and where do you feel like the comfortable spot is?
I think we should know. I don't think, from my point of view, I don't think unfortunately, the quality of the work is not going to be worse because you want to do everything 100%. And I think, it seems like after COVID, everything has changed a little bit. Before, when we did some of the John Wick movies, we shot in New York, we shot like 15, 16 hours every day. And of course, then you're dying slowly. But it seems like right now, everybody's working 10 hours and that feels fine. You have this running lunch and you're already, the glamour of Hollywood, you're already sitting on an apple box and eating some cold, whatever a cold, whatever pasta, whatever it is. And of course, I think I like to have 10 minutes where I can just be on my own in the middle of the day, but it seems like that disappeared. We are running lunch. All the shows I'm doing is running lunch. So I'm working all the time, and my guys are doing the same. So we are having lunch on Apple Box. But I like to go to the camera truck for 10 minutes and just clear my brain, but it's not happening anymore.
I think one thing that...
What's that?
I was just going to say, Dan, that there is often happy accidents that, I'll be pushed at the end of the day and there's not enough light. And this has happened to me frequently. And they say, do you have an exposure? And I'll think, it's gone. We've lost it. And then because we're pushing, and I shoot it. And then quite often I look at these things and think, oh, that's beautiful. That's,
yeah.
This is where my fallibility kicks in. And I was so determined that it was too late. And actually, so I think I totally agree with Dan. And I think the pilot thing does come in, that you have to do it as well as you can. It's not that you have a choice, and you're professional enough to make sure you bloody well do it to the highest possibility. And I think I often work better late in the evening than I do first thing in the morning if I've had 6 hours sleep. So, I need a few coffees to wake me up in the morning. But
yeah. And, again, for example, John Wick 4, I think we shot 110 days night. We shot the whole movie at night. And maybe I think there's one scene in the daylight or whatever. And of course, that was crazy. We shot, even when you're inside, we stayed at night because we didn't want to turn around. So you're not just getting in to zombies. And, if you're reading about working very long night shifts, it's not good for your brain and for your body. But, so we have we shot everything night. It was crazy. It looks pretty good.
So how do you guys strike a balance between work and time off and time with your family? This is a difficult balance to find for most film workers, and film marriages can be tough. So how do you guys manage that?
Well, cinematographers are famous for being very good at divorce and, and not being very good at families. But I guess for me, I have to have time off, and I value my family hugely. And I think my career path was the first 15, 20 years I was away 10 months a year. And then when the kids came, I moderated that a lot. I have a very tolerant wife, and that helps a lot. But no, I need my family, and it's a private world that's real, and it's a private world that grounds me and that is deeply, deeply important to me. It makes the fantasy world of cinematography work much better. And I think it makes me as a character on set far more easy to get on with because I have a grounded family.
So Dan,
As Tony said, cinematographers are pretty famous to get divorced. I think I'm a part of that group there. The problem is, I think, for example, Frankenstein, I was away from Denmark for 11 months. And the movie I'm doing right now is going to be the same. So, I have growing up kids, and I have a very nice relationship to them, and they're coming to me to visit me a lot of times. And but it's tough on the family because it's like you want to do it as good as you can. You want to be there, and if you're living in a country where there's not making any movies, and you can say you're living in London, you get the big job in New Zealand or whatever. It's tough on the family. It's always tough. But especially because I think the television shows, is getting huge. Feature films of some of them is getting really huge. So you're away a lot, and you are working long hours. So it's I don't think it's the best business for family. But on the other hand, I have two wonderful kids. I will not live without them for a second. So I did something right.
okay, that actually leads me to just sort of an observation here that it seems to me that streaming platforms are now the new haven for ambitious one-off projects, because Hollywood tended, I mean, almost already like 50 years ago, Hollywood tended towards safe bets, like sequels to you do a Rocky movie, then you do Rocky 2, 3, 4, or you focus on a franchise or something. But it seems to me that the streaming platforms are now the new place where you can do an ambitious one-off that's not intended to be the pilot of a series of films or something like that. Is that something you guys would agree with or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that because I've done quite a lot of them. I mean, whoever would have funded Fleabag, really? Amazon gave us a pretty reasonable budget for it, and here she was breaking the fourth wall and sort of implicating the audience, sort of portal to our complicity in her bad deeds. And so I think, yes, streamers have been brilliant in giving, and the budgets are, you're getting 10, 15 million an hour, or Carnival Row is about 25 million an hour. And that's a big budget so yes. And I think it also means that, for instance, my choices are often, I'll pick a mini series like Get Millie Black, instead of waiting for a movie that maybe 15 million or 20 million and it's getting pushed, and and it shifts and shifts, whereas TV is more reliable, and it is a golden era. I think the streaming golden era is the Netflix, the Amazons, Apples. They're trying to do things that are very different, and they're starting to do political films again.
Yeah. Dan, how do
Yeah,
you feel about it?
I haven't done television series for a very, very long time. I just did one in my life. But of course, Frankenstein is made out of Netflix. Of course, it's going to be a cinema release, but it's going to be running for Netflix for tonight, I think, or yesterday. And I just think that's the reality of the new world, And I think it's great to make movies and people see them instead of you're doing a movie and nobody sees that. And of course, that's so I think whatever you can do to have people to see your work, that is amazing. So for me, it's like, I don't like when people seeing my movie on iPhone or in the plane where the windows are open and stuff like that. But again, if people see the movie we're doing, I think that's amazing. And a lot of people have really, really nice home televisions now, and it looks so cool. But of course, I think if you can see a feature in cinemas and the cinema is good, it's great. But everybody have been into a cinema where it looks like that the screen is so bad. But for me, it's the most important thing. I don't think about if I'm shooting when I'm shooting, for example, Frankenstein, we're thinking about how does it look on our monitors. This is our world. We're not thinking about people are watching on an iPhone or watching on a $500,000 screen somewhere. We are making it as good as we can on the set, and of course, it's great when people are seeing it and streaming.
Yes, right. So how do you guys feel? I mean, you guys started out on film, on celluloid, and you shot tons of that, and your transition was that you sort of clung on to it. How do you guys feel about when projects are shot on film today? Does it feel like that it's sort of a statement with that production that is done on film, or how do you feel about it?
With Mr. Malcolm's List, which was a Universal movie I did 2 years ago or so, with a sort of £15 million budget, the director very much wanted to shoot film, and she thought she'd get publicity, and she would have got. It was a sort of blind casting, very diverse period sense and sensibility kind of Jane Austen film, and we would have got big publicity shooting film, and we abandoned it really because of not being able to get insured during COVID to get the film to the lab in London. We were shooting in Dublin, and I think I've reached a place, I'm not 100% sure, but I think I've reached a place where with LF and 65, I actually feel really happy there. And I feel that I'm getting images that are as good or better than I was getting on film. And I think, as Dan said, I've transitioned to the monitor. I've transitioned from my light meter and only pretending I do it just with my eyes, to realizing I can do it faster with glancing at a monitor.
So Dan, how do you feel about
I think the beauty about the world right now is people can do whatever they like. And when we shot my last movie, Frankenstein, on digital, I'm pretty proud of that look. And I've done some really cool movies on film as well. And it's just I think Alexa 65 is so good. But again, if you want to shoot, for example, shooting IMAX on film, that's a dream. I've never done it, but that's a large format again. Again, if people feel it's better to shoot on film, it's fine for me. I have no opinion about that. It's just when we are shooting, what I'm working right now, it's the digital medium is amazing. And I think it's, as Tony said, it's faster and it looks really, really cool, because as far as I understand, if you're shooting on film, you're going to telecine the film into a digital medium, and you're doing all the post in media in digital. But again, if people want to shoot on film, if somebody asks me to shoot on film, I will be more than happy to do it. But I haven't shot film for many, many years. Again, I think the digital medium is so good. And the whole setup, the monitors and all that stuff, it works so well for me. And it's not like I don't think I miss anything with not shooting on film. But again, I haven't shot film for some years, but I've shot, as I said before, 40 films on film. And I don't miss all the discussions with the lab. When you have a scratch that's going like that, and that's the camera scratch, and it's a lab scratch, and you're getting dailies there underexposed, underdeveloped, and you have to all those troubles we have. When I was growing up in Denmark with a small lab, we have all the problems in the world, and it was all the cinematographer's fault. until it was actually the lab said, oh, maybe we did that mistake. I don't miss that. I don't miss all the troubles with the lab, but I think I miss a little bit the mystery about when you're shooting on film. That was another world, but that's again, that ship have sailed. You look in, as I said before, you look into the eyepiece. There was no video tab. The director and you were sitting next to each other, and he said, ask you, how was it? And you look, it was pretty good. Maybe that actor was looking into the camera, because it's amazing how much you can see in these small eyepiece when you're used to it. I think that's a big difference. The concentration when you shot on film, it was maybe bigger because it was for real. And a lot of times we're not doing rehearsals anymore. We just, let's shoot the rehearsal, because if it's not good, we just do it again, because it does cost anything. So I think that is a bigger thing for me between film and digital. I think when we shot on film the old days, the concentration was much bigger. But maybe that's the iPhone's fault, because everybody's on iPhone all the time now. But that's another discussion.
Tony, you mentioned something similar, that you really enjoyed the discipline on a celluloid.
Yeah, and because we did rehearsals, and even if it was just blocking through where people were going and giving the focus puller a chance. And I think also because I so often find even now that, if take 1 and take 2 are really good, then your take 3 and 4, you're going to have to go to take 7 or 8 till it gets really good again. And so film gave you that discipline that, you unless it was a massive budget project, that you had to be careful with how much film you shot. And so it sort of fed through the crew, and that discipline was really good. And I liked the mystery, and sort of kicking myself that I'd know what it looked like, and then finding happy surprises. But I think, if I'm honest these days, and again, as Dan, I love shooting film. I adore celluloid. I wish I was shooting it still, but as a communication between the director and the DP, being able to look at a monitor together, and especially when I'm not operating, and sit with them, and it helps your communication. And I think in our modern era, everything is so fast. It's got to be really quick. You don't have an hour to light anymore. You've got half an hour, and all that means that I think go with the technology. And I think, if I'm slightly the grave digger of lots of different vintage lenses, I'm not of technology. I think, the more we harness it, the more we make our cinematography fast and simple, and give us more time for the things that really matter, the better.
Yes, okay. Another question here. We've been talking a lot about lighting, and I guess for you guys, you will be given the time to light a set or a setup until you feel satisfied with the light. But is there any kind of light you strongly dislike that sort of rubs you the wrong way? A key light coming from a certain angle or something, creating certain shadows that you don't like? Do you have some kind of light that you really don't like?
Yeah, I don't like when you have a highlight on the nose. When you put in backlights and it's a little bit too high, so you have this highlight on the nose. I'm getting sick of that. I don't have any problems with nose shadows or stuff like that, because it's coming from somewhere. But if you have a backlight and the nose is getting a hot kick there, I kill that light, because I don't like it.
Okay.
That is,
Would you have that flagged off in that case, or?
yeah, but sometimes you cannot flag it off, because the way we are shooting, the light is coming from a miles away. So, and the camera, we are coming in with those wide angle lenses. Just no, you cannot flag it. You can put a flag up and paint it out later on, but we try to avoid that. But I'm pretty good to put a light somewhere and then paint it out later on. But this highlight, I have something with that.
If you try to flag it, the flag would be in the shot then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so
painting.
Tony is.
Well, sometimes I can't, I have the same problem. what I try and do really hard is get it right first time, put the light in the right place, but you don't always. And like Dan, my strategy of lighting is I use LEDs for fill. I use them, other places, but I try and light with big sources and off the set as much as I can. I don't always manage it, and it depends on the budget of the film and the time, but single source lighting, and I tend to cross light much more than I backlight. And I do backlight because people stand against windows, but I try generally to, I just end up finding it less theatrical, I guess, as a point of departure is to cross light. And if I do get into big trouble, then I guess I know these days I can probably do something in post-production with it. Or I'll do what Dan said, which is just put the light in the shot and paint it. It's easy.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm interested if we sort of rounding things off here. If you each could try to say what has been your driving force through your career as a cinematographer. Has your ambitions changed, or has it been to continuously challenge yourself or keep trying new things?
I think it have been, for me, have to be making stories with the right directors. That have been a big challenge for me, and try to, as you said, Tony, direct painting with the light. I try to do that as much as can. As Dorado said, I know it's a little bit of like that, but it is actually you're painting with light, and we try to do that as much as we can, and it's. Right now, I think it's getting more and more fun. So that it's going the right way. Because I've been around for some years. So for me, it's like, I like it. I love it. I think it's, and again, you have to follow your style and your light and your heart. And again, to young filmmakers, kill the fill light. That's my, put some black up, have a negative fill, because the sensors are so good now, so keep the atmosphere. That is my kill some of the light. It's going to be nicer, I think.
But Tony?
Yeah, I guess I just feel very privileged. I think it's, I'm 60, and I think experience I have does kick in. I enjoy it a lot at the moment. I think the pleasure's been trying to underscore emotion, trying to, grandiosely be a painter with light. It's such a privilege, and so, whether you're on a big set or a small set or doing a documentary, it's just sort of through an artistic means trying to underscore what's being said and what's not being said. And something like Fleabag that broke the fourth wall taught me a huge amount, that characters often reveal themselves to the camera. They turn away from the other person they're having a conversation with, and we feel as the audience on their faces, what their inner thoughts are. And so how we do that with light those are key sort of seminal cinematic moments, I guess. So, and I'm always just amazed. I think that there's just more and more to learn, that you think you're experienced, that you think you've understood something, and then you realize there's other ways of doing it. So I'm wittering, but that's the basis of it.
Okay. I'd like to thank our panelists here, Seth and Tony and Dan, for so graciously sharing their time and their experience and their insights from their careers. And we're sort of running out of time here. So thank you also to Adriana and to the tech team who made this technically possible to do this video cast. Adriana, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, we have a question from our audience, and John Anjulu from Nigeria asked, what are your thoughts on mixing lenses in a project to achieve certain performances? Is this something you will consider or discourage?
I think we talked about that before, but yes, depends. I have done it before, you know. I think one part of the movie could be anamorphic, another part could be spherical. I have done that, and you know, I think changing lenses to make the story more clean or clear, that is works 100% for me. So yes.
Okay, it's important to have some question from the audience. We are arriving to the end of this marvelous talk, but if someone from the audience wants to make another question, it is the moment just before the end. Mm, no, we don't have any more.
All right.
So, no, thank you, really thank you to Seth, Dan, and Tony, Lars for a wonderful sorry, your question were very, very interesting, and let us to know more Dan and Tony work. And thank you from IMAGO to this wonderful talk, for this wonderful talk.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you
you
all.
very much. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Lars.
Bye.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody.